Now for our next big story here on Breakfast Extra, we turn to Nigeria's energy economy and a major decision affecting petrol pricing, foreign exchange strain and national inflation. The federal government has suspended the proposed 15% import duty on petrol, diesel and other refined products. The duty was initially planned for revenue expansion, but marketers warned it would immediately worsen fuel scarcity, spike pump prices and cripple small businesses already struggling with high operating costs, by the way. Now, according to industry experts reports, the government says the suspension is temporary, aimed at stabilizing the market, reducing pressure on importers and preventing a further rise in transport fares and food inflation. But the big question is now, what does this mean for forex demand? What does this mean for fuel availability? What does it mean for Nigeria's long-term energy strategy? So, joining us to break this down are two voices who understand the sector inside and out. Investment banking executive Nnaemeka Obiaraeri and oil and gas technologist Bolarinwa Durojaiye. Gentlemen, you are welcome, one online and one with us here in the studio. Mr. Nnaemeka, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's start with Mr. Nnaemeka, who's in the studio here with us. Mr. Nnaemeka, I know that you're going to go explosive on this, and I'm hoping that I can hold you back. But do tell us, what are we looking at here? First off, this policy has been pushed back, so it is imminent. It is going to happen. The government says it's trying to, well, amongst other things, also boost local production of petroleum, give refineries, local refineries, a chance to be able to get set up, which is questionable, and also start to produce. The Dangote refinery only serves for 40% of Nigeria's needs. The other 60 were depending on imports. So it's an entire kaleidoscope of factors.
From my own perspective, I think the introduction of the 15% in the first instance was ill-advised. Ill-advised because we know currently that the supply capacity of Dangote refinery will not meet up to 100% of domestic demand. And again, for a country like Nigeria, we understand clearly that the best way to drive competition, the best way to get the best for consumers, is to allow free entry, free exit of players across the whole 4 sub-units in the downstream oil and gas sector. I'll give you an example, Brazil. You know, I always look at comparing Apple with Apple. Crude oil reserve of 15.5 billion barrels, which is 40% of Nigerian crude reserve of 37.5 billion barrels. Proven, we can actually do up to 60 billion barrels in Nigeria if we go into deeper explorations. Brazil, Petrol, equivalent of NNPC, was established years after the NNPC, which was under the Nigerian National Oil Corporation. What has Petrobras been able to do that NNPC is not doing, and why the Brazilian downstream oil and gas is more efficient than Nigeria? They produce 3.9 million barrels of crude every day from just a reserve of 15.5 billion barrels. The Petrobras manages about 11 refineries that are working efficiently, and 8 other refineries that are owned by private investors. Brazil refines 2.5 million barrels of crude in these 19 refineries every day, which is far more than what they consume domestically. But if you go through the books, last year alone, Brazil imported over $23 billion worth of white petroleum products and the crude. And why did they do that? They allow openness of the market so that domestic players do not play games with the system. And I will explain to you, there is no way somebody in Rotterdam or a refinery in South Korea does not have crude. Netherlands does not have crude. There's no way somebody in Rotterdam can refine purchased crude from the international market, ship it into Nigeria, and it will sell cheaper than the one that is produced by either a Dangote or a Bua, if the market is very competitive, because we are sitting on top of crude deposits in Nigeria, and we can actually get crude. Because the man that is refining in Rotterdam will first of all have to take crude from the refine and then ship it. So basically, suspending it is the right thing to do. And for us to actually get it right, which we will discuss later, we need to do what Petrobras did.
We're going to come to that.
Exactly.
Obiaraeri.
Yeah.
Now, let's put a pin in that. Bolarinwa, let's come to you now. I just asked Mr. Obiaraeri what he thinks we are in now, what kind of a situation we find ourselves. I'm wondering where your stance is on this 15% import duty that has been imminently shifted to later next year.
Well, thanks. I'd like to dial it back just a little bit to get a sense of, what are we trying to achieve? What was the intention of government in this 15% tariff in the first place? We're all familiar with industrial policy and what it typically aims to achieve in terms of, in this case, the government has said it's a revenue drive. But we also know it's a two-pronged thing. The idea is to disincentivize imports and then incentivize local production. We also know that industrial policy, where it has been really successful, like the gentleman has said, cannot just be taken on its own. You need to have a very strong hand on the local producers so that they don't get lazy and they don't start to manipulate the market and all of those fears of monopoly and all of that. So, that's kind of where this whole thing, that's the general backdrop against this whole thing. And to that extent, I personally do not think it's a bad idea. I think that it's in alignment with a general, industrial policy drive. I'm trying not to use the word import substitution because I don't really believe in that. I don't think they're the same thing. I don't think it's a bad idea. In terms of local producing capacity able to meet domestic demand. Again, there's a lot of controversy about this. I heard you say 40% of local demand. The jury is out on that, because if you look at the actual output capacity of the Dangote refinery now, some will claim and tell you that this number actually meets local demand. And I'm sure Dangote himself will tell you that. So there's a lot of controversy around this. But generally, we seem to see a picture where the capacity of that refinery to meet local demand, from what I see from the research I've done, is more than 60%, which then kind of changes the framing of this whole conversation that, okay, our fear here in terms of, and I'm trying not to get ahead of the conversation here, our fear is the knock-on effect at pump prices, but we need to dimension that fear. How much is actually being imported right now? How much do we even really need to import in terms of the gap, if there is a gap in supply to domestic consumption, and dimensioning that fear or that concern will help the conversation massively. But I'll let us continue.
All right, Bolarinwa, in a moment, I'm going to put this in a very people perspective, in a very ordinary Nigerian perspective. But first, I hear what you're saying here about how positive this might be for the Nigerian economy. Mr. Obiaraeri here thinks it's ill-advised. I'm wondering, as an expert, Mr. Obiaraeri, what questions do you have for Bolarinwa?
Okay, not question actually, but we are not actually divergent in our opinion. I will explain to you why we have to be very careful here in Nigeria. I've asked this question, and it's a question we need to ask again and provide answers. If you go through the records at the CBN, you will see October 2010. Throughout from October 2nd to October 31st, go and check that record. We were doing crude and condensate production of 2.8 million barrels a day. There was a time we were doing 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 million barrels of crude and condensate.
So what changed?
A day. So what changed? Did the oil wells dry? We all knew what happened. You remember 2021, the then GMD of NNPC, Nnaemeka, live on TV, told us that Nigeria, on average, lost over $1.9 billion worth of crude oil to TIFRA inefficiency every month. That's a whooping $22 billion lost every year, and it has not stopped. Why are we doing 1.65 million barrels? Why Brazil is doing 3.9 million barrels? It's a question we should answer. We talk about the impact of this on forex revenue. If Nigeria is doing 2.8 million barrels, if Brazil can do 3.9, Nigeria can do 4 million barrels based on our reserves and our fields. Why are we not doing that? Next question again. Why are we still allowing NNPC to be under the control of the federal government of
Mr.
Nigeria.
Obiaraeri, now I understand these little details that you're giving us here, but to the average Nigerian, the everyday Nigerian on the street, these complexities do not matter to them. The complexity that matters to them is whatever simplicity
What do we do
in their pockets
to reduce the price?
How it affects the transport fare, how it affects the cost of food in the market, and this will exponentially go up if a 15% tax is put on it.
Exactly, and I'm even coming why we don't even need this. Because we need to tackle the foundation. Because what we are trying to do is we are trying to put opiate and elixirs instead of providing lasting solutions to the problem. The question is, if Nigeria today is doing 2.5 million barrels of crude and condensate, which we can do, which we have done before, our OPEC quota is 1.65, 1.7. We can actually designate the excess crude production to a Dangote, working with a DAP. I've said this thing all over the world. Go and check. In Saudi Arabia, a liter of PMS is selling for 60 cents, which is lower than what we are saying. It's about 833 naira if you use the official exchange rate. Yet minimum wage in Saudi Arabia is over 4 million naira converted. In Brazil, a liter of PMS is 1,450 naira equivalent if you convert the Riyadh. But minimum wage in Brazil is 470,000 naira converted. So what do we do? Because the whole argument is, what do we do to reduce cost of refined petroleum products in Nigeria? Nigeria is the only place where we are producing. You know that was the time we used to produce a barrel of crude in Nigeria for $16, $17. Why are we producing at $31, $40? Whereas in other areas around the world, from Iraq to Iran to Libya to Russia to Saudi Arabia, they are doing. So the question is, those in authority, those who are managing our oil and gas, need to sit down and look at the whole bucket. If we decide, you cannot invent the wheel. I always say this thing.
Yes.
What Petrobras did was very simple. The Brazilian government divested 72% of their shareholders to local investors and foreign investors, and had only 28%, shielding Petrobras from the manipulations of the public sector, making them very, very competitive. That was why they were able to attract funding, had investors flowing into Brazil, and they were able to ramp up this. Nigeria can actually go back to do what we're supposed to. We can actually have a special arrangement where we will do crude, where we supply crude to the local refineries at a given price that is below the market price, international price, to enable them produce under a special arrangement with IPMAN, with DAPMAN, and with other downstream operators involved in the whole scheme. So that within that bucket, whatever is refined within that local is sold within the local market. And at that level, I've given details before in this studio, we can be able to sell petroleum products, what petroleum products, either aviation fuel, deep kerosene, or diesel, or gasoline, at a price of not more than 650 naira per liter anywhere in Nigeria. But rather than do the right thing, they are choosing the easy way out, putting more burdens on Nigerians, which is not acceptable.
Thank you very much for that very descriptive analysis there. Bolarinwa, let me come back to you with something that Mr. Obiaraeri has said. Make local refineries competitive. If you can provide for them crude oil at reduced prices, then they will be able to produce, without making that burden of the extra cost fall on the consumer. However, let's go back a page. Where are these refineries? If this 15% levy has been pushed for a couple of months, will these 6 months or few that they have given be enough to set up these refineries, these local refineries, since one of the arguments is that it is supposed to help us boost local refining of crude products?
That's a tough question, and you probably know the answer as well as I do. There's no magic that's going to happen in 6 months in terms of boosting the capacity of these local refineries. And then again, the elephant in the room is we're not really referring to the Dangote refinery here. We're referring to our own homegrown local refineries, and we all know the recurrent story about that. So no magic is going to happen in 6 months, and I don't think we need to mince words about that. However, I want to seize the opportunity to perhaps reframe the conversation about feedstock. And it may not be a popular view, but I don't think there's anything wrong with importing crude. It's a shame, that we are not, unlike the gentleman Nnaemeka has said, our ability to exploit our own reserves and our own crude oil production capacity should be addressed. It's a serious thing. It's essentially leaving money on the table. However, from a broader perspective, we need to, and I'm careful here, like I said, we need to get it right. We need to get as much crude produced as we can produce. Absolutely. And we're not even hitting our capacity at all. However, from a posture perspective, we need to get out of that mental model where we are fixed to the commodity itself. You do not need to produce crude yourself to prosper and to be energy sufficient as an economy. You don't. Simple example, and it's not a perfect example, but I mean, this whole Swiss chocolate industry and all of that, they don't, how much cocoa do they produce? You know, and it's an opportunity, you know, for us to kind of jolt ourselves and remind ourselves, especially as commodity producers, that the commodity is not where it's at. As a matter of fact, it has been established that refiners have slightly better margins when the cost of the commodity goes down. What I'm saying here is, you know, if there is a crude oil price crash now, what would normally be a disaster for us in terms of foreign exchange supplies and all of that can be a plus if we double down on the refinery itself. All right. So I'm taking the conversation in another direction, but I think it's necessary just to get our mental models right. Yes, maximize crude oil production, but that's not too much where the conversation is. The conversation is maximize refining capacity wherever you get your feedstock from and export refined products instead of crude oil.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Obiaraeri, let's talk about the downstream oil and gas now.
Yeah.
We are still dependent on foreign exports of crude, refined crude, whether we like it or not. We still import about 60% of our use here in Nigeria. Now, this tariff being pushed back, whether it being implemented or pushed back, whatever the case, it's still going to happen. How does this affect that sector? Doesn't it seem like as if we're taking food away from a very large community of established businesses?
Yes, we are. And, you know, if you come to the downstream oil and gas sector, it's actually segmented. We have the refinery, which is the big player in the market. We have storage facilities, providers. We have haulage providers and truckers. And then we have the retail stations, which is the outlet. Where
it's a lot of communities.
Yes. So all over the world, most refineries do not just sell straight to the market. They have bucket of traders who buys from them, sometimes make offer payment or put in place letters of credit or bank guarantees. And so these refineries sell upfront even before production because they are guaranteed off-takers for those refineries. Those off-takers now will go down to begin now to look for people that have depot to sell to. Remember that even before now, under the old arrangement, those who built the old refineries from Gowon to Obasanjo to Babangida also made provisions for storage facilities, not just those by the coastal waters, but within inland. NNPC has huge storage facilities across Nigeria. And they also have huge pipeline, you know, laid across Nigeria that have all been, you know, they are no longer in good conditions because they understood the place of storage. And in Nigeria, they will have over 122 storage centers. Aggregate value is over $38 billion, employing not less than 100,000 people. Basically, what we should do as a country is to, like I always say, we cannot invent the wheel. We need to create the same arrangement everywhere in the whole world, where all these players within the system play, you know, interlinked in such a way that we don't create problems for the economy. The US today does almost about 20 million barrels of crude production every day, despite the fact that the cost of production is high because of the fact that they are fracking. Yet in the US, they have over 50 storage centers, strategic storage centers that is even houses over 50 to 70 million barrels of products. To show you they understand the place of storage and strategic reserves, even within the economy. So basically, like I've always said it, we have 3 refineries owned by the federal government. It's not working. And we have been on this for the past 10 years. Last 5 years, we wasted $3 billion.
So 6 months enough.
And it's not working.
It's 6 months enough.
It's not enough. Bua is coming on stream. Okay. Bua has 200.
How much production would Bua add to
200,000 barrel nameplate capacity. Of course, we have local refinery. We have
and how does it affect?
We have.
So I think
for me, what I think we should do, like I said it, we need to sit back, because energy policy is it's not just about government raising money. We can actually raise monies doing the right thing. He says something very, very instructive. If Brazil is doing 2.4 million barrels of crude refinery within their system, we can actually support Dangote wholly. Like I've also, we need to support even local production. We need to also support the local modular refineries. We need to support Bua. We need to even encourage more people to come on stream. You understand? We need to, that refinery that is wasting, Port Harcourt and Warri, I've said it, I've made this suggestion. Dapman and Moman and Ipman, which are key players in the downstream, can go into a special arrangement with the federal government. If, as long as that refinery is under NNPC, it will never work. And people make this argument, oh, they are old. If you go to Texas, there are 102-year-old refineries that are still working all over the world. In fact, there are over 28 refineries in the whole world that are older than the refineries in Nigeria. But for it to work, we need to privatize it, value it, put it in a bucket, sell down 80%, 30% to Dapman members. They form up their own SPV. 50% to Nigerians. NNPC can hold 20%. List it on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. There's a 444,000 barrels that are meant for those things. You can hand it over or even give them marginal fuels where they can drill their own crude, because we find it's very, very important. Okay. And now, between Port Harcourt and Warri, they already have existing infrastructure. If you are to collocate a 160,000 barrel crude refinery into that place, it will cost about 8-10 billion. But because there is an existing facility, it won't take more than 5 billion. We can go into a wholesome arrangement and say, okay, take over this, give us a timeline to revamp it, collocate new refineries. Bua is going. Dangote is even talking about ramping up. Yes, go ahead and ramp up. Bua. Then we need to put in policies that will enable us reduce cost of operation in Nigeria of crude is very expensive because of inefficiencies, of dilapidated infrastructure, of crude stealing. Okay. It does not make sense to be using barge to be moving crude because the pipelines are being vandalized.
So Mr. Obiaraeri, most of your suggestions are always on a long-term basis solution. Now, my final question for you would be what the temporary solutions could be, especially as we're staring at this implementation of this 15% tariff. I'll let you answer that after Mr. Bolarinwa here answers this question. Mr. Bolarinwa, every Nigerian lives with traumas of, oh, when is the next fuel scarcity going to be? We've had very adequate fuel supply for the past couple of months, but everybody still has that, like, we're trigger happy. By the time you say fuel, everybody thinks scarcity. No, I meant fuel importation. But scarcity is the next word that comes after fuel for most Nigerians. So will the implementation of this 15% duty for imported products actually help solve absolutely that issue of fuel scarcity, or the fear of fuel scarcity ever happening in Nigeria?
I don't think it's a tough question.
Yeah, I know. I'm saving all the tough questions for you.
Yeah. Fuel scarcity comes when there is an interruption in supply of fuel. This tariff is not going to affect supplies. It's going to affect the price at the pump. Yeah, it's the flows will keep coming. Yeah, those who are importing will import. The question is at what cost. So I'm thinking that the conversation should be more about the impact, inflationary pressures and kind of first and second order effects. In terms of the supply of the product, I don't see an issue, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to say you skirted around that one, but I'll just let it lie.
I will answer that question.
You want to?
Yes, I will answer that question. It will affect supply. Let me explain to you why. Last 2 weeks, the landing cost of a liter of the PMS from every part of the world to Nigeria was 823 naira per liter. Okay. As at that time, Dangote was selling at gantry at 877 naira per liter. Now, basically, why did they import? They imported because the landing price was lower than what Dangote was selling at gantry. And of course, by the time they bring it in, pay all what they're supposed to do, pay all the regulatory agencies, they may actually sell below what Dangote is saying. But if you put 15% on it,
It goes up.
The landing price becomes 947.
There you go.
There's no importer that will take the risk of landing a product at 945 when the local refinery is producing at 877. So, and if they refuse to import because they are not seeing any margin anywhere, and the local refinery is not meeting up 100% of the demand in Nigeria, there will be scarcity.
There you go. I'll take your words for it, gentlemen. Mr. Obiaraeri and, of course, Bolarinwa for joining us. We say thank you very much. There's still so much to discuss when it comes to this issue. We'll wait to see if the implementation will actually solve the problems that we have or even the greater complexities that surrounds Nigeria's oil refining problems or issues. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today on Breakfast Extra. We'll continue to monitor the story. And, of course, if we have to, maybe bring you back in to have more conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.